Hey everybody, it's Ren here, and welcome back to the Fuwanovel podcast. This is episode 10 of the official Fuwacast today, that I have with me two guests. Today's topic is a little bit of an interesting one on what we're going to be discussing. It's not a specific visual novel or a specific topic in general. It's more a broad topic that was recommended by the community. I'd like to thank, I think it was Santig that came up with this idea, and we're going to try it here and see how it all works out. The topic that I'm discussing is crossing shores, Japanese VNs grabbing a foothold in the West. How can visual novels outside of Japan gain a kind of fan following outside of countries that are not just Japan? So with that, we'll jump right in. With me, I have two very special guests. One is Metal Upa from the forums, and the other is A Shadow, and they're going to introduce themselves here. If you guys just want to, we'll start with you, Metal. If you just want to introduce yourself, kind of where you're from, and why you want to be part of this podcast episode. Go ahead.
Hey guys, I'm Metal Upa 1014. I'm an American. I live in Pennsylvania. I'm about to enter my last year of high school, and online I'm associated with two websites, thepunkeffect.com, which is an anime, movie, video game reviewing site. I mostly cover things related to anime and film, but I've also occasionally covered a few games. The other one is Video Game Music Online, a site dedicated to covering video game music, both West and East. Been, interviewed several composers, done dozens of reviews, and of course I'm part of the Fuwanovel forums. I was specifically interested in this topic because I'm somebody who's studying the Japanese language on my own, and I'm really interested in the differences of culture between East and West. And me being a huge video game fan, you see a lot of these weird kinds of games that are in Japan that we don't really see here. And one of those was visual novels. So I was really curious to see why visual novels are so popular in Japan, but we only get a few of them occasionally. Why a lot of them don't get released. The cultural differences between the two, between East and West, that prevent sort of visual novels from becoming popular and grabbing a foothold here. And I'm also a big fan of podcasts. I listen to a ton of them daily, and this is the first one I've ever recorded. So I thought it'd be interesting to join in one myself, and just have a discussion with people who share the same interests that I do.
All right. Well, welcome. Thank you. A Shadow, go ahead.
Yeah, that's me. I'm a Shadow, and I'm really nervous for this podcast. This is the first podcast I've been on, so far, ever. And what do I do for visual novels? I have this YouTube channel where I make reviews for visual novels, and there's basically nothing else special about me. The reason I wanted to be a part of this podcast was that I have this one fan of mine, and I made this video which was just titled "The Future of Visual Novels" a couple of months ago, and this one fan, he just immediately went on me and told me, "You should be on this podcast for this episode. It seems great given this video you just made. Go do it. So eventually I just gave in and said, "Okay, fine, I'll go volunteer. Just shut up."
Was that Bobby Kerr, by the way?
It totally was.
Yeah, I had a feeling it'd be something like that.
He's a great guy, but it's like, oh my.
Well, it's good to have you.
To
No, thank you. It's good to have you. Thank you for volunteering. Glad to have you guys both on here. So we're going to jump right in here and kind of just get in on the discussion here. So I'm going to start with kind of more of some broad questions just to kind of get people familiar with what we're talking about, and then we'll go more into the specific questions. So one of the first questions I want to ask before we jump in here is the term West. When one refers to, our topic here is about, visual novels, making them pop, how do we transfer them over to the West? The term West is used a lot in the discussion of visual novels outside of Japan. To you, what does Western culture encompass? Does it refer to every other country outside of Japan? Is it just an American style, Western culture? Do you feel the term is appropriate in this case for using West versus East? If so, why? And if not, is there a term you like to use better? So I'll open that question out to you guys, just the term West in general. I guess we'll start with Metal, just because it makes more sense logically in my brain. What do you think?
Okay. Okay, well, I personally define the West as sort of, I guess, like the Western hemisphere of the world, like what encompasses like the United States, South America, I guess, yeah, Europe too, and I can define like the East as places like China, Japan, Korea, and I mean, I'm sure that there's like tons of people out there who will debate, what the difference between Western culture and Eastern culture is, but I'm sort of sure that once you like sort of get into a different country, you can kind of like point out the differences, I guess. I mean, it's sort of hard to explain. Like, what about you, A Shadow? What do you think?
When I constantly hear when we're like talking about how vision we should make vision novels popular in the West, to be honest, I don't like really like that term. I would actually prefer we just talked about like making vision novels popular outside of Japan, because whenever somebody says West to me, I think North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and that's kind of it. So whenever we say like West like that, we usually like leave out South America, the Middle East, Africa, Russia, um, to some extent the Southeast Asia, like India, for example.
Yeah,
So
I guess
I
that's
would
just
actually
because
prefer if I would actually prefer if we're like when we're talking about making visuals more popular, I would actually prefer if we just talked about like everywhere on the planet that just happens to be the little island of Japan.
yeah, I guess so because visual novels are sort of like just like a specific thing that like a Japanese creation, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I know that in China and Taiwan, they are having like a little own like visual community are growing there, so they are doing fairly fine on their own. But I would prefer it if we could encompass like more than just, Europe, North America, Australia, etc. The normal place when which you think about when you talk about the West,
It's
if that makes
interesting.
any
It's
sense.
interesting you mentioned that, A Shadow, and I want to go back to your topic on that. When you
Which one?
originally, no, I just want to go back to what you pointed out about how you think it's more North America, Australia, and those countries, and you mentioned that you
Uh-huh.
don't really encompass the Middle East or South America, and it's interesting because a lot of people on our forums and the Fuwanovel forums are from Brazil, I've noticed, or from countries in South America, or there's some Middle East countries that some people are around or in that area as well, and they are pretty active members on the forums themselves and are really into visual novels, and that's interesting you mentioned that because I'm curious as to what their thoughts are on that, just like Western culture as well. I do agree with you, A Shadow. I'm not going to really go into my opinion about it, but I just wanted to kind of get a base of what we're talking about for everybody in terms of West, so we all can agree that it's mainly countries outside of Japan. I think a lot of people might think that like Asian culture countries are more Eastern culture countries, where Western is more not Asian culture. Because China and
Yeah.
Japan, just
Yeah.
language-wise, and this is a whole different topic, are very similar, in character and stuff, and just like how their cultures were, they were similar to each other, including like Korea in that area. Obviously, it's changed now, and there's a lot of differences, but they're still very like culturally similar, architecture-wise, gaining that kind of thing. And I think that's where the Eastern Western culture. But it seems like such an old term, so just curious on your guys' thoughts. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Any other thoughts on that? For it, that was just a broad, encompassing question here. Okay.
Not really anything in specific, no.
All right. Well, that's good because that kind of can transition to our next question here. Which is so when one thinks of the term visual novel and they actually know what a visual novel is or have heard of it, Japan is usually the first thought, generally speaking, that this comes into someone's mind more than likely. While most novels are originally written in Japanese language, there are some visual novels that we like to call the OE. I'm going to mess this up every time. OELVNs.
OEN.
Yep, and for those of you listening today, that stands for Original English Language Visual Novel. I don't know why it's such a long term. I don't know why it's not just an original English visual novel. But anyways, some
The
examples of those.
OLV.
Yep, some examples of those. Just kind of for those that are familiar, Katawa Shoujo is probably the most popular. Most people were introduced to visual novels, from what I've heard, from Katawa Shoujo. It was a very successful fan-made visual novel over the last 4 years. Came out in 2012, beginning of the year. And some other ones we came up with were Sunrider, Vlad the Impaler, which was one that was featured on our website recently. That's on Steam currently. Sakura Drop was everyone knew what that one was. Go Go
Sakura
Nippon,
Drop.
yeah. Um, I think that's what it's called, right? I didn't mess that up. I totally.
Are you talking about Sakura Spirit?
Yeah, Spirit. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm saying
That's
drop.
fine.
Isn't that an anime? I must have screwed that up. Anyways, I know I've heard that term before. But, yeah, Sakura Spirit. I'm sorry. I apologize. Gogo Nippon.
There's something Sakura something. There's some anime for it. I know that you're right, but I can't remember exactly
I
what the name
swear,
is.
yeah, I swear.
I mean, it's a popular Japanese term, so it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Sakura something something.
Anyways, another couple of ones we came up with the StarCraft esports visual novel, which I kind of
That's
laughed
mine.
at that. Yeah, when we came up with that. And then Hotel Dusk. This is just some examples that we came up with at the top of our head that are more popular. So we're kind of going to go into that and discuss that now. So my question here for you is, after you know kind of what the LVNs are, do you think these visual novels are good ways to introduce audiences to the genre outside of Japan? And if so, why? Do you feel that they are good representations of just like the culture of what a visual novel is supposed to entitle, or do you feel that because they're written originally in English, the English language, they have a different style of like writing approach? Because obviously we've had discussions about visual novels from Japan being very not stereotypical, but like they have niche. They have a niche. They have common traits.
Anime
things
stereotypes?
Yeah, stereotypes and things like that. So I'm just curious. So I'll open this question up to A Shadow this time. Do you think this is a good way for visual novels to be introduced to audiences outside of Japan?
Talk about smacking me in the face with a question that I don't really have any good answer for. I think it is a good idea. Yes, assuming that you pick the right visual novel. I mean, the obvious example of this is, of course, the Katawa Shoujo. I mean, it was the game that actually introduced me to the entire visual novel genre. But to be honest, I would say that most original English language visual novels aren't aren't really a very good choice. Like Sakura Spirits, for example, probably not the best choice to introduce people to visual novels with.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too.
Uh,
I'd agree with that one. Yeah, let's just say I'd agree with that too because I mean, like for Katawa Shoujo, for example, that's a game where you date like crippled girls, and I'm sure that people who've read it, we know that it's like way more than that. But just like the premise itself, that could be an immediate turnoff for a lot of people who want to read it.
I
Like,
remember
have heard of
seeing the comments from people when they heard the premise at first glance. They were enraged.
Yeah, I know, and also especially because like the original game, it came from 4chan, like that was where the original concept came from. Yeah, and we all
What
know
a
like
perfect combo.
yeah, and we know like like the great stuff that comes from 4chan, right?
Definitely.
It's interesting you mentioned that too because Katawa Shoujo is. I think they did that. Do you feel like Katawa Shoujo, I guess it's more of a question, do you feel like that was their original intention making this novel to introduce audiences outside of it? I mean, I have not interviewed any of the writers or the people behind the project, and I didn't do too much research on it. But do you feel that this was kind of their goal? Do you feel that they just wanted to get together and make something? Obviously, to have the devotion to make a game, and they are the only successful visual novel ever, like big one that was successful that was physically created. I mean, there's a lot of groups trying to do Kickstarters and things like that, but usually they drop. Or I've never actually seen one outside of Katawa Shoujo. So I'm curious, do you feel that that was their goal? Do you think they successfully? Do you think they successfully did it? Because a lot of people from over the world know what a visual novel is, and I always hear Katawa Shoujo, which is surprising to me.
That's not very surprising. Let me have this one first. I was actually reading up a lot on the blog. I just went back to the blog on Katawa Shoujo. Let's not go into the reason why I did that, but I went back and just read through all the blog posts, all the way back from like 2007, were the first blog posts from the developers blog, and they said that they wrote the question themselves: why are we even making this? Almost no one is going to play this. The players who will experience this is going to be like 50 people. So based on that, I would assume that they were not actually intending to bring new people into the visual novel community. I think they were just trying to make a visual novel just because they wanted to do it. They just thought it was fun to make it. And then the fact that it became as huge as it that was completely taken by surprise. I remember reading it once at some time. The line they wrote was something like this: the fact that there's an actual fandom around Katawa Shoujo is amazing. I'm almost completely certain that they did not expect this huge popularity around their game at all. And it was just a great consequence for them.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, but I'm pretty sure that when like the idea was first like brought up in 4chan, it was like I think the actual like concept and stuff, it was different from what the final product was.
Sort of. The original idea for Katawa showed, I can't talk. For Katawa showed, it was just one illustration which was drawn like 1,000. Yeah, it was 2,000 by some guy, and they actually made some changes to this original to this illustration in the final game. There was especially this one little line by what's the burn girl called? Not Lily, Hanako. Hanako. Yeah, yeah. She had this one line which said like, when the main character confesses to her, she will start crying and say, "So blank," and said something like that. They completely skipped that because they thought that this wasn't include this for the final game, because that did not reflect her character.
All right.
So that's some useless information for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so kind of on the flip side, see that's interesting. On the flip side, do you feel like, you were talking about Sakura Spirit. Do you feel that that game, you said there was a bad representation? Why do you feel? Yeah, why do you feel that's a bad representation of a novel? Which it was a top seller for a while on Steam, and Steam is a very popular platform for digital games. Obviously, they have the Steam sales. People go crazy about those. So it was a good, way to represent their novel. But what do you feel the problems are with that? I mean, comparing it to like Katawa Shoujo, which is successful, why do you feel that, that's more successful? And you could feel free to say because boobs, because honestly, that's a lot of people what they argue for that. But I mean, what do you guys feel about that?
Okay, I'll take this one.
You go first.
Yeah, I sort of consider like Sakura Spirit to be like hentai that's not hentai because it's like it's not like it's like not an 18 and up game. It's like a 17 and up game. But I'm like looking at this game. I'm sort of wondering like what is like the point of this? Because like I sort of like to find there are like two like camps of like visual novel players. The ones that like enjoy like the VNs with the H scenes, and the ones that like don't. So I mean, this one it doesn't have like H scenes, but it's like too like really like adult to be like an all ages title, and I mean, then you have like a stereotype online where people think that all visual novels are like porn games, and I think like Sakura Spirit, it's sort of just perpetuating that stereotype that everything that comes out of Japan is like over sexualized and like it's just there to like because of boobs basically.
Basically, I'm kind of whatever, to be honest with you, about Sakura Spirit. I mean, it does definitely reinforce this stereotype and this notion about that visual novels, they are all porn games and nothing else. And given because of age scenes, that's kind of hard to argue against sometimes, but whatever, that's a different topic. But I actually believe, I don't know what I believe on this topic, but simultaneously, Sakura Spirit, I don't think it's just going to be bad. And it brings in sales, obviously, to what's the company that brought this over? It's Sekai Project, right? They're the ones who helped the localization, isn't it? It's Sekai Project, right?
I have no idea.
I'm looking it up 1 minute.
Okay, whatever. I'm assuming that it's Sekai Project. So if we just assume that they get in some sales because they are a company, right? They need to get some money to get food on the table. Assuming that they just get that, it can help them bring other like actual good visual novels to the West. Like I know that they are bringing like Planetarian and Grisai no Kaditsu, for example. Those are great titles. I'm happy that they're bringing those over.
I looked up. It was a Sekai Project. That's the company.
It is those guys.
Yeah, what's interesting from them though is that they've expressed interest in bringing over like the key games, like you mentioned, like Planetarian.
Yeah, please do that.
Yeah, and I think that like if they bring over like Canon or Clannad, that could actually like do pretty well. But I think that this is gonna like get a lot of people angry. But if they bring this over, I highly doubt that they're gonna have like H scenes in them because it doesn't really just seem like marketable towards like the.
And they cannot have H scenes if they want to put it on Steam, and I assume that they want to put it on Steam because that's a great way to market these games. But Steam it's a complete Steam doesn't allow H scenes, does it? It completely forbids that kind of content.
It is a matter of just because Steam is an American-based company in California.
Oh, really?
It's Valve. Okay. It's an American-based company, so they just the censorship laws for that. That's interesting because I'm actually going to go into a separate question here that we didn't talk about earlier. Being it that we're trying to make these Western popular culture visual novels, Japan has a very, their visual novels a lot of times do have H scenes in them. I mean, that's just the way
Yeah,
they're built
great.
because
Bleh.
sex sells money. That's just how it is. People have opinions about that, yada yada. But the important question here is: do you feel that being that other countries have different censorship laws? In this case, America, because we don't put. I'm from two of us are from America. We don't put a lot of pornographic material in games, but Japan is able to do that with certain laws. Do you feel this is going to just ruin what an actual visual novel should be like? I mean, even if you think that H scenes are necessary, do you feel like like I can't think of there's a lot, but it's very like a lot of games have H scenes. I mean, you look at Keysworks with Little Busters; they literally just released Ecstasy, a version with sex scenes in it, because they're like, well, this is gonna sell money, and they added extra scenes. Like they did not need to do that, and they did,
Yeah.
because of just because they wanted to add more. And from here on out, they're just making the all ages. But do you feel like that's going to
I
like
can't hear you.
attract? Sorry, do you feel like that's going to I guess like attract the I've totally lost my question there. I'm sorry.
Like if it's like would like detract from sales if they
Yeah,
H
do you
scenes in?
feel like you're not getting the true visual novel experience if you're not including that kind of stuff in it? I mean, you look at Soccer Spirit; it's a huge cock tease. That's the word you probably were looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just a giant cock tease. I've read the writing. It's horrendous. I apologize if I offended anybody by that.
Girl wielding swords.
Yeah, I've read a lot of good books growing up in my life, and I'm not a writer myself, but I know when something is, half, a high school kid wrote this, it's good writing, but at the same time, it's not. There's no real
Well, it could be the
development.
translation. It could be the translation.
I mean,
but I don't.
yeah,
Wait,
that's
it's
generally
original,
speaking.
right?
Yeah, it's original. But I mean, it's just a bunch of artwork with Katis, and everyone's reviews on that game are basically just, why even play this game? It's like not even 2 hours, and you can literally get all the gallery by just clicking on the gallery and unlocking it all, and so like and then just fap whatever people do with their images. So my question again, sorry, not to get too distracted here, is do you feel like it's do you feel you're not getting a visual novel experience over seas in different countries if you're taking away an H scene? And I don't want to go into our H scene's important topic here because that's not what our topic is about. But do you feel you're taking away from introducing people to visual novels and what they are about?
Well, I think that it sort of depends on what the visual novel is, for example. Because, for example, I think it was either a year ago or 2 years ago, the visual novel "If My Heart Had Wings." There was like a huge controversy over that because the company that was releasing it in English, they were taking out all the H scenes.
Manga Gamer.
And, yeah, exactly. And like it was
Wait, that wasn't manga.
was it Manga Gamer?
I thought
or-
it was Manga Gamer.
No,
wasn't
it was not. It was not manga game, right?
Because
It was
it just-
it was Moe novel.
Oh yeah, it was more enough.
Ah.
Manga Game, I think they usually
Manga
release
Gamer is like a porn game company.
Yeah, they usually release their stuff uncensored. But yeah, with "If My Heart Had Wings," though, a lot of people were like angry with it because they took out like the scenes, but it made the story lose its meaning. It there were like parts that had to take out chunks of writing to make up for the sex scenes being taken out, and it just made the story a broken mess. And even like just seemingly innocent things like hugging and kissing, they took that out too. And there was a huge backlash from the visual novel community because of this. And then it's even available on Fuwanovel. There was a patch that restored everything.
Yeah. To be honest, when they take out, I know where you're coming from, and I see this whole thing about taking out age scenes. I see it as something like, yes, it does change the visual novel to some extent. In many people's lives, it's going to ruin it. In my eyes, it is changing the visual novel for the better, because I believe that age scenes are bad. They do not make visual novels better. I mean, there are so many cases of age scenes in visual novels that I can think of. You could just take this visual novel, remove the age scenes altogether, make very little change to the writing, and it would be significantly better as a whole. I mean, Fate Stay Night, that's the perfect example right there.
And that's
Plus,
sorry, keep going.
okay. Plus, it's the whole stigma against just age scenes and sexual content in general in basically the whole West. I mean, especially America, right? I mean, I'm not from America. can you back me up on this one? In that
Well,
sexual content is kind of looked down on in America.
yeah, as American, I'll tell you that like in America, we seem to be fine with like violence and like blood and gore, but as soon as you show like one breast on like television, everybody's like up in arms.
Oh
saying
my
this is-
God, that's not okay.
And
Yeah,
honestly,
exactly.
that's not as true, but when it comes to a culture that, I would say when it comes to a culture, in this case, Japanese animation and anime styled, novels, then it becomes this is just like, cartoon porn is what people would think of it as. You watch TV shows that are very popular like Game of Thrones, there's porn all up, it's just porn everywhere, and that's my opinion about it.
Yeah.
It's just is sex. HBO has a bunch of sex, and people watch these shows, and they're okay with that, but as soon as you go, here's some cartoons, they're like, whoa, no, we can't do that, and then there's just like all these censorship like rules, and it's I don't really know all the laws behind it, but that's what I've noticed. As soon as you get into something that people aren't used to, because they're not used to that, like.
Yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing about that.
Exactly.
People they're not used to. It's completely like alien to them, and as anything to us humans that is foreign, that is alien, that is unknown, we will basically fear it and reject it and try to like fight back on it. Basically, I'm pretty sure that's basically what's happening. And basically, to essentially the entire visual novel genre and like the entire anime medium as well, to some extent. I'm pretty sure that's basically what's happening.
Well, I mean, like with H scenes themselves, I'm not entirely against them. Like as long as they like add to the story. But I think that like for example, like the early key games like Canon Air, those had H scenes throughout them, and I personally view them as kind of unnecessary given the tone of like
agreed.
given the tone of like the visual novel, what these characters go through, and like Key themselves seem to have realized that also. So when they ported like Canon from like PC to like PlayStation 2 or whatever consoles, they took those scenes out, and it still didn't really like change. It didn't like negatively impact the game, and some people have said the all ages versions are like better than that. But so like I'm saying that like if they released Canon or Air on Steam, it would like if they released it without the H scenes, it wouldn't take away from anything, and I think as a result you might even have a better game to begin with.
And this is
interesting. I want to build on that. For a minute. I agree completely. This is why I say that removing H scenes would be good, because it's so many H's. They're just put in there just for the sake of being there, just for the sake of that label on, hey, play this game and you will get porn. Nice players, now give us your money. That's the reason why I believe that removing H scenes would be positive. You will no longer have this stigma about that it's just a porn game or whatnot, and you would actually like read it for the story, which is the actual reason you play visual novel, except something like Strike or Spirit, of course.
Kind of to get back on track, because I don't want to go into a topic of why we think visual H scenes are important, because that's not our topic here today.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
There was a transition that I did want to go into that I really enjoyed that you mentioned, and that was you had made oh gosh, I just forgot it. You had made a point, Uba, and you had said what was the last point you just made? I completely forgot now.
Who of us?
Metalupa. He had made a point, and I can't remember before you went on that expansion.
Was it about like the key games with Canon?
Yes, ports. Interesting you mentioned that, because take, for example, the game Grisaya. It was ported to PS Vita, and they removed all the H content from that. And I find that interesting.
Which one?
Grisaya no Kachitsu.
Grisaya, okay.
Yeah, all the H scenes and new stuff were removed when they ported it to the Vita. And that's interesting because I've noticed that every game that gets ported over to a console has usually all that adult content removed. And I'm curious as to what your thoughts on that are. Do you feel like... because we can go into this next topic here. Introducing visual novels to other countries, what consoles do you think are the most effective for doing so? Do you feel that PC is the way to go? I mean, we're big on Xbox 360, which, I know like Shar no Kuni's released on Xbox 360. I don't think they have the H content in that one. I'm not sure on that. I think they removed that as well. But a lot of times when things get ported to the console, it's they remove that. So which consoles do you feel are the most effective for introducing people to the novels? Do you like the handheld devices like the DS, the Vita, or do you think that PC is the way to go? I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Just a quick question before we get into this. The reason they remove age scenes and adult content on console that's because they're just not allowed to do it because of whoever owns the platform, right?
Yeah, that's true, because both Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, they don't allow like AO games or like 18 plus games onto their consoles, and that's both the same in Japan and the US.
Okay.
Okay, so but as to what consoles though, I think that VN should be on. To be honest, I don't think there's like you have like a snowball's chance in hell of releasing Visual Novel and Xbox 360 and PS3 in English because the market is just overrun with AAA games like Call of Duty and like Grand Theft Auto and stuff like that. And in a market that's run by games like that, a game where
User
you
disconnected from your channel.
a game like where you read read text and you make choices, it can't really like work in that kind of environment. I mean, it just wouldn't sell.
That's a good point. I noticed that we had one of our members disconnect. He's probably back in here very shortly. I apologize. Two, because yeah, you're right. The third party platforms are very they're very demanding in the market. I mean, do you feel that Steam then is the best way to kind of introduce these people? Because I just think of Steam right away because that's when people think of PC games. PC Master Race. What are people's opinions about that?
Yeah.
But I mean, do you feel like Steam is the way to go then?
User joined your channel.
Welcome
Sorry
back.
about that. Okay, I'm back.
No, you're fine. We're just we're waiting for you. Do you feel that Steam is the way to go then? In this case, Uba, that just are like, is that the best way to do it, or do you feel like we could market these games? Because in America, unfortunately, at least I'm just using my own country as an example. I don't know the rest of the world. You can't sell adult games in retail stores. You can't do it. It's law. So I mean, they wouldn't even be able to put them as hard copies, whereas Japan and their soft maps are able to do so. So what do you think is the best, most efficient way to get them on PC or to introduce them and that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely Steam would be a huge boost for the visual novel community, and especially if like these companies can actually go the extra mile and pay for prominent advertising, like front page, like for maybe a week or so. That'll definitely get more people to at least look at your game and determine, okay, this looks pretty interesting. Maybe I'd be interested in trying it out. And I think that also with Steam, you have to have a demo of your game. Give the first chapter out for free, and that will probably sell your customers on if the story's worth if the story is interesting and if I should continue reading.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts, Akis, just on, what console's most effective or just how to, that kind of thing?
Or I definitely do have some. I think that PCs and stationary consoles are a pretty bad platform for visual novels because I still consider visual novels to be just basically a book that you want to to sit down on your couch or your sofa or your bed and just lie down and read it, just no problems. But when you have to focus on a big screen that's pretty far away from you, that's just kind of straining on the eyes, I feel. So personally, I actually just read all of my visual novels while sitting on my bed using my laptop. And for this reason, I still believe that we should use tablets for visual novels. Tablets would be like the perfect platform because using that you can just play anywhere you want, and as tablets gets more full, they will get more memory, and we won't have any problem with stuffing our visual novels onto it just because of space issues.
So yeah.
Furthermore, and you could just if you do this, you could basically also start marketing visual novels as basically like ebooks. Essentially, you just say this is an ebook which happens to have images and music to it. It's just a book. It's not a video game. It's a book that with music and pictures. Because that's essentially what visual novels are.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to also bring up handheld devices. I personally think that mobile, like iPhone or Android, those are also good platforms for visual novels because we have on tablets and smartphones, there's a huge ebook crowd out there, and if visual novels are marketed as to to this crowd saying, okay, this is basically a fancy ebook that has graphics, sound, voice acting, music, and all of that, and if we can show these people, if we can show these people that that if you like ebooks, you're going to really like visual novels, they might be interested in it. Chunsoft, for example, back in 1994, they released this famous sound novel called Kamatachi no Yoro, which was a horror video game, and then 20 years later, just a few months ago, they released it on the iOS. They didn't market it as a visual novel, as an interactive book that you can read through and make choices, and I'm not entirely sure how well it sold, but the reviews were very positive of it.
That's also pretty smart because do this. You can also get around this stigma against video games because games I feel that despite that video games are so mainstream these days, they're still considered like kind of nerdy, kind of like especially like perhaps not our generation and the below, but the generation above us, like
Like
our
adults,
parents,
yeah.
for example. They, yeah, precisely, like adults, they wouldn't like care for visual as long as they have like this like video game label attached to it. But if you again drop the video game label, replace it with an ebook label, put it on a device that they can easily access, like laptops, phones, tablets, on like a very easily to access service, like maybe the iOS store or something like that. Now it
Yeah,
would be
absolutely.
something that they perhaps could be interested in reading.
Yeah. My brother actually brings up like a point of that because he's somebody who doesn't read visual novels. He tells me, "Oh, that looks so boring. Why would you do that? Why not just like read a book?" So that like sort of like agrees with your point, saying this shouldn't be marketed as a video game. This should be marketed as a book.
Yeah, does it
And
read books but not visuals?
I guess. I mean, it's
and this I'm going to kind of
That
butt in
seems
here because I have a
hypocritical.
really good, this is a really good transition, and now I kind of want to take, not really a turnaround in what we're talking about, but more a big question that I just thought of, and this is always kind of myself personally has been like something that I've always been interested about. So I'm going to start off small here, and then we'll go into the bigger topics because this is when we'll get into actually like challenges and how we can do this. We'll start talking about that because we're about halfway through the podcast here. So I'll start with this. When a lot of OEVLNs, and just visual novels in general, use Japan as a setting of culture, and a lot of the times it is anime. It is an otaku-based thing, and so I can understand why making these popular for people are not, because people don't want to look at anime. People think it's, like you said, it's associated with the nerdy groups of people. It's like, with video games. And so that's a huge challenge. And then when people talk about, like, I've had people, for example, we use the example of, Vlad the Impaler was put on the forums. People usually there was a lot of positive review on that from what I read on the forums, but there's also people that say, that's not a visual novel. That's not visual novel. It doesn't have anime in it. It doesn't have anime sprites in it, so it's not a visual novel, because when one thinks of a
Really?
visual novel...
You found that reaction?
Yeah, and well, there were some people...
I've never heard that.
No, there were some people that said that, when they think of visual novel, because I know a lot of what we call HOGs, hidden object games in America. They're like cheap $20 games, adults buy, and they're just like, hidden object games. You basically click and find hidden objects, but there's visual novel elements to them. I don't know if this is popular around the world, but it definitely is in America. Like Big Fish Games is something. It's like where you can buy like games like, slot machine stuff and like Angry Birds and stuff like that.
I
And
have no idea what you're talking about.
interesting,
right now.
because a lot of hidden object games here in America and adults have visual novel elements. They'll like go around and sprites appear, and they are animated, but it's not anime. It's just
anime style. It's not the anime aesthetics.
No,
Is that what
it's
you're
just
saying?
animation. Not anime. It's not like Japanese animation. It's just regular.
Question, just give me an image of what you're talking about. Is this like the old point and click adventure games? Are they
Yes,
like
kind of
that?
like point and click adventure games,
Like
but
LucasArts.
instead this is more you just point and click, and then you like click something, and then you find objects. That's the point of the game. It's to find objects.
Okay.
But there is story elements to it, or they'll tell like a mystery or a horror story, and there's visual novel elements. And it's interesting because when people are playing these games, they don't think of that. I've asked people that have played these games, including my parents. Sorry, my phone. Including my parents being one of these
Fine.
people, and they don't know. They have no idea what they don't. I say visual novel, like what the heck is that? They don't think of that, and that's interesting because I feel like what do you think of that? I mean, I guess the question here is. Japan is their culture. Do you feel that's a necessity for introducing people to visual novels? Or do you feel like, we can capitalize on, example, these hidden object games or games that have, like, sprites? When I think of visual novel, I think of still sprites, text, and that to me in itself is a visual novel because there's a story and they have, elements of like backgrounds, and they give you the setting. You don't need to imagine it like a book, which some people prefer the imagination and being able to think. If you had Harry Potter and you watched the movie, like when I watched the first movie of Harry Potter, I was like, well, this is nothing like what I pictured in the book, and you're completely wrong.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
In any book adaptation, you're like, well, that's not what I thought it was, and so that's for people. But getting back on track, sorry, I'm going on all these tangents. Do you feel like Japanese culture is, you look at Katawa Shoujo, you look at Sakura Spirit, you look at Go-Go Nippon, for example, it's all Japanese culture. Why do you think this is? I mean, why can't they make an original novel that just doesn't have that appearance to it, I guess is my question here. I mean, do you feel it's a good
Short
idea?
answer, I have no idea, and I'm asking myself that all the time because it's so annoying, to be honest. I find that. Sorry, that was my quick rant.
Well, I think I can give you like an answer to that. I think it's sort of I'm not speaking for all Americans, obviously, but I think that like people, at least in the U.S., they've had sort of like a fascination with like Eastern culture. Like there's a group of people who like say, oh well, this is different from our culture. It's interesting to see what the differences are like. Because like for example, you have like the I don't know if you guys have heard of it. There's a book and a miniseries called Shogun by James Clavell, and that was like when that came out in the 80s, that was extremely popular because it was showing American people, what like Japanese culture was like, and this like increased interest in Japan and stuff. And so I think that because of that, with visual novels like having a Japanese setting, that can sort of show like people like things that they aren't used to seeing, food, culture, customs and stuff that they aren't used to seeing in their own country. On the other side of that, you have some games that are Japanese, but they completely Americanize them. Like a good example is Phoenix Wright. That's a series that's extremely Japanese. It's like a parody of the Japanese legal system, but brought it over to the United States. They completely Americanized it. They changed all the names. They tried to make you think that you weren't in Japan. You were like in Los Angeles, California.
Yeah, and except they still use, Japanese animation. So like a lot of times when my friends point out visual novels, they instantly say, "Oh, that's just anime." This is an interesting point because when I mention visual novels, at least in my own experience, people think of, oh, are you watching anime? Because that's what they associate with culture-wise. But it's not. It's not an anime. It's not a TV show. It's a book, and that.
Yeah, that's.
And I don't know if that's the same for you guys when you introduce or when you explain this to people, or this kind of culture, is that people just say like, "Oh, we know you like that anime stuff," because like people just encompass this type of style of drawing, big girls, big eyes, a lot of shininess and things like that, breasts, whatever, school uniform and that kind of stuff. They think of anime, and that's like everything is clumped into anime, and it's hard to branch off. No, there's not just the anime. There's manga, which is a story. There is tojins. There's visual novels, and it's hard to like divide those in some people's minds. Do you feel there are better ways? I guess I'll go kind of in another question. Like, do you feel then it's a good idea to keep doing this in Japanese style culture? I mean, do you think it's a good idea to do that to get them the authenticity of a visual novel, or do you feel that hey, we should stop doing this because people just immediately assume, oh, it's anime, and instead go with like original, like, hey, let's use like art, just like drawn artwork, and just like a character, but not put it in don't make the big eyes, don't put it in anime, and see where that gets people. What do you think?
Sure. Let me take this one first. I think that the constant obsession with like Japan, especially among like original language Western visual novels or whatever they're called, I think the constant obsession with Japan, with high school, and with like anime aesthetics in general, I think that's very bad. I think that's limiting the. Limited. I can't talk. I think that's limiting the entire like medium and what we can possibly do with visual novels. Because I'm going to say something right now. You don't need anime eyes to make a visual novel. Like a good example of this is like Narcissus. The aesthetics in that visual novel, there's very little anime aesthetics. As far as I know, there's only a couple of CG images in which the girl in that game, she looks into a window and you can kind of see that she has this like anime aesthetic eyes and whatnot. But for the rest of the entire game, there's almost like no sprites. They're only like simple images of like the hospital they're in, or like the car that they're driving through, like some flower field or maybe some beach. There's very little anime aesthetics to it, and the entire game ended up being freaking phenomenal. It was like one of the best visual novels of all time, at least in my opinion. And I feel like, do you want to make an interruption here?
No, go on.
Okay, sure. And so I feel like if Western developers who made their visual novel just drop the anime aesthetic and just set their visual novels like outside of Japan and just make a completely new setting, then we could just get much greater variety to visual novels. Like just like a couple of examples, you could make like I don't know, Germans making a visual novel about like a Jewish family who is sent to a concentration camp. That could be something that would probably not be made in Japan. Another one, like, no, I can't think of any good example. You could have some Western developers making a visual novel set during the Mexican drug cartel wars. That's another one that you could possibly make. Or about the moon landing, or just some like Canadian cultural reference thing that nobody would understand. Or just, anything that doesn't have with Japan to do. You could have use like any other culture on the entire planet. That's basically what I'm getting out of it. It's just limiting it. It's really annoying me.
Well, there actually is like a whole like group of visual novels that don't have the anime style. It's by this company called Chunsoft. They're very popular in Japan, and practically all of their visual novels, they're done with like photographic stills and like video footage of actual live action actors. It's essentially like filming a movie, and they use like the stills from the movie to tell the story. And for example, a few years ago, they released this game called 428 in a blockaded Shibuya. It got immense praise off of like the magazine Famitsu. 40 out of 40. It sold very well, and everybody really liked like the in-depth story that it told. And it didn't use any anime. It didn't use any anime art style. But the unfortunate part of that, it was never released outside of Japan. And I kind of see this as a waste, because this could have been the first visual novel to show people that not all of the games that come from here are anime art style. That we can like do things that are like realistic. It looks like actual people.
I've never heard about this thing. Is there any fan translation patch in the works for it?
Funny you should ask that, because I'm actually working on the fan translation patch with a bunch of other Fuwanovel users. Yeah.
Very interesting, and I'm glad that came out the way I wanted to in terms of question wise. It definitely, I could see where the question is for that. So I just wanted to kind of just touch base on that. Like, it doesn't need to be anime necessarily to be a visual novel. So before here, because we have about 15 minutes left of the podcast, I want to make sure we get into some of the just more general questions that people might expect out of this podcast. Is that visual novels?
Keep going if you want, if we need more time.
Yeah. Visual novels are a very tight niche that has a fan following in Japan. We've all developed that based on what we've talked about. Why do you feel it is a challenge for making these novels popular in other countries? So let's talk just about the challenges, the advantages, and the disadvantages of doing this, of making these popular. So we've talked about ways like how we can do it, what are some effective things, and what are some ineffective things. But how is this? I guess, how do you feel? Why do you feel it is a challenge for making these novels popular in other countries of the world? I mean, do you feel there is effective ways for introducing other countries to visual novels? How do you get this started? Like, you got to start somewhere, but how do you do it? Where's the market? We talked about, platforms you can do it on, but like, how do we get going into that? What is your opinion on that?
There are so many problems making visual novels popular in ways. Do you want to go first, Metal?
Yeah, sure. First, let's just talk about what a visual novel is. You're essentially clicking like one button to read through like tons and tons of text. Like the average gamer that I know, they try to skip all that. They try to like spam the A button to like get past like the cutscenes and like the text to get to the actual gameplay. So we have to ask ourselves: is there a market for people who like would just experience a story while they don't really care about gameplay? Like making the choices. That's the gameplay. Would that be okay?
Metal Gear Solid. Just gonna throw that one out there. Perfect.
Well, that's also half of my name too.
I love Hideo Kojima, but when I played, for example, like games like Xenosaga, a lot of those old RPGs are just cutscenes of movies, and they're like a story. And then you're like, man, where's the gameplay? And then you like play for a little bit, and then you'd be like, I guess there's some more cutscenes. Like Metal Gear Solid 4, for example, was when I played, and that's my opinion. I'm sorry, I don't want to butt into the podcast, but
I want to make another toss in here. Every single JRPG ever. Like, seriously.
Yeah, well, yeah, people think that there's like a lot of hand-holding in that, where they tell you everything, but like, let's not get off topic here.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Okay, so do you feel like, I guess my point is, what you were trying to say was, do you feel that the effective way to do that is to introduce them to, like, we talked about what a visual novel is. I guess you really didn't answer the question yet, sorry. What do you feel is the effective way for doing that then? For getting people past that, I got to click and read text. Like, how is it different, when you read a book? I mean, obviously, if you don't like books, you're probably not going to like visual novels. Most of the time. I'm one of the rare exceptions. Maybe there are some more. But, I mean, most of the times, if you don't like reading, you're not going to like this.
No, you won't.
No. So do you feel like, people who do enjoy reading, hey, instead of reading this book, read this? Like you said, do you feel the PC is the one hindering it because you have to sit down and click a mouse constantly and you're bored of that? Do you feel like it should just be an audio book? Like obviously it doesn't matter what the language is, just an audiobook because people listen to audiobooks all the time. What do you think are some effective ways?
Yeah, we touched upon this. I think that we should not market them as games. We should market them as ebooks, target the e-reader crowd. I think advertising has to do with we should advertise and instead of saying video games, say interactive novel or choose your own adventure book. Those were really popular to begin with.
Choose your own adventure book is definitely one that I don't hear thrown around a lot, but a lot of people when you say that it's yeah, that's pretty much what it is. You pick choices and they change the story. I mean, that's all you're doing. You're just reading and changing the story. So I like that one.
I've been thinking about using the name of visual ebook or maybe a sound ebook or something like that. You just use the word ebook and then add another word to it to make it sound fancy.
Going back. Sorry, I'm going to quick just butt in there. Going back, just visual novel in general, this kind of goes back to that previous question about the Japanese culture thing. When you think of visual novel, what is the first thing you think of? I mean, like I said, people think instantly anime. I mean, do you feel like that name should be changed to accommodate the West or, just the other parts of the world? Or do you feel like it should remain visual novel? Do you feel that that's a term that's stapled with an image on how you think of it? Like when you think of, Dungeons and Dragons, you think instantly you're thinking of the game, and you think, because that's what the game name is. I can't think of a good example right now, but when I think visual novel, you instantly think, oh, anime, girls, sex. People just instantly jump to those terms.
Yeah. I think the visual novel term is kind of fine, because if you walk up to any random person on the street and ask him, do you know what a visual novel is? 99 times out of 100, he's not going to have any idea. So there's almost no label to it, at all, except within the visual novel community, and we just associate them with, anime books, essentially. So I think right now the term visual novel could be fine for most people, but if they give it the wrong idea. If you walk up and say this is a visual novel, they're not gonna understand what it is just from now. You need to very carefully explain it, and even with the explanation, I can say this from personal experience, people just won't understand what it is until they play it.
Well,
that makes sense.
Well, there's also, talking briefly about 428, Chunsoft, they label their visual novels specifically as sound novels. Sort of you're reading a book and they use sound effects and stuff to tell the story. So I think that perhaps that name, would it be any better? Sound novel?
The problem about sound novel is that, one, it's a trademark, so other companies cannot use it. And I'd imagine when you say sound novel, I associate that with audiobook, and I think a lot of other people will do so as well.
I would probably jump to an audiobook conclusion as well.
Yeah, myself. Yeah, I guess.
Because I just think sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think really the point here that we're trying to make is you have to have good advertising of of what a visual novel is. I'm not sure if this would be a benefit or not, but the Let's Play channel Game Grumps, they looked at Go-Go Nippon and Sakurai Spirit, so at least they were giving this publicity. So perhaps if these people major YouTube channels talked about these, maybe it could reach a wider audience.
Yeah. That actually leads us to another problem that I have about visual novels getting popular in the West. It's just how invisible the entire medium is. Is that nobody ever hears about them because it's so niche, and there are no source for information on them, and there's basically no way for people to get to know that visual novels even exist. So how do you solve that? How do you even get people to know that visual novels are a thing? I don't know how you fix that.
This is an interesting question. Before we go into this, I want to ask. I guess I'll ask this. What do you feel? We'll try to make this a quick question because I want to ask one more question after this. Do you feel when we're trying to introduce people to visual novels, what in your terms, in short answer, is the goal for you? And I'm curious about your goals, individual, because you're the ones on the podcast. Do you think is the goal, the ultimate goal? I mean, are you trying to say, hey, here's some novels that have these stories to them, check out these original Japanese ones, because as soon as you turn to, you can introduce all these English novels, original English novels. You can introduce all these games similar to what we think of, like when you think of, like, for example, I'm doing Kokoro Function. That is in itself like my staple definition of a moe game that has girls in it, that's cute, it's anime, and it's a story, and that's a visual novel. But like if I said, hey, try, even if that was in English, if I said try this game as opposed to like try the Phoenix Wright games, like people would be like, this is weird. Like people would not, even without the H scenes, like, so what is the ultimate goal of like trying to do this? Like, what is the ultimate goal? Like, when we are we trying to get them to the point where they're going to appreciate the original Japanese works that come out of Japan, and like say, look at this awesome culture, or and get them into like anime, or are we trying to, what in your opinion is your ultimate goal? I'm curious about that.
I think that for me, it would to like basically see I can walk into like a game store and see like a copy of like Steins Gate next to like a copy of like Call of Duty, for example. Like for at the point where like visual novels can be like on store shelves with like other games. I know that I mentioned that like they should be targeted books, but like if a visual novel can be like as well known as like these other series, or that you can bring them up into casual conversation and people will know what you're talking about.
Do you want to make it like as popular? Because like honestly, anime is a culture. I mean, you either like anime or you don't like anime, and most people know what anime is. You talk to anybody and they'll know what it is.
Yeah.
Do you want the same thing to happen when it comes to visual novels? It's still a group that you either like it or don't, but it's more like, hey, people will know, like, oh, you play visual novels, and at least people will be able to identify with it. Because I feel like that's kind of at least is my personal opinion about it, that's kind of my goal, is I want people to be able to identify with it, not like it necessarily, but at least be able to know what it is. Because as you said, 99 out of 100 people are not going to even know what you say when you say visual novel. Whereas if you like talk about anime, they'll be like, oh, yeah, I don't really like anime. Or, I used to watch Dragon Ball Z as a kid or something. Something will say something. And if you mention visual novels, they'll be like, oh, you like visual novels? Ah, that's kind of cool, but I don't really like them. Is that kind of what you're feeling like a goal is? Or what do you...
Not for me.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
Keep going yourself.
I think that would be a good goal, because at least people like know what it is, and then you have a higher chance of people being interested in potentially checking it out. Because I know that there are people who like would normally not like anime, but after they're introduced to like a series like Attack on Titan or Cowboy Bebop, that's how they like get interested into it.
Don't go into Attack on Titan with me.
You don't like Attack on Titan?
Attack on pacing. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to talk about Attack on Titan right now. But okay, I'm interested, Aki, because you were talking. What is your goal? I mean, are you trying to make people like this? Like you're like, hey, like this. You need to like it, or like, what is your ultimate goal?
Well, short term, the obvious answer is that I just want like more people to enjoy the medium. Every time I can just make a person just get into visual novels and just appreciate it for what not, that just makes me happy. I just want more people to get into it. But if you want like a very long-term, decades into the future ultimate goal, then I would want visual novels to become a new medium that is basically an evolution of the book. Because I feel like ebooks is basically a limited, it's limiting its potential right now. So I believe that if we could get new visual novels from like all over the world, from Russia, from the United States, from the Middle East, from Japan, from the Nordic countries, if we could get that, we could make visual novels to become almost as big of a medium as just normal books are as now. And in that case, that could open up completely new doors for entirely new stories that right now we're just focusing on Japan. We couldn't imagine that. Like, we can't imagine all the different new possible stories that like countries like from the Middle East, like the people in the Middle East could produce, or people in Africa produce, and that would be like just amazing for us. And now a lot of people will say that, I don't want that. I would like visual novels the way they are right now. I don't want them to change. To which I would say, like, you shouldn't worry too much about that, because Japan will probably just keep producing the games which they are producing today. They will just probably keep doing that. They won't really care about the rest of the world. So, in doing so, if visual novels could become a really large medium, you could get a ton of works from the outside of the world. You could get Japan's as well. You could get just an amazing amount of possible other stories, because it just bugs me that I just feel that visual is such a limited medium as a whole. I feel that we could do so much more with it.
All right, I'll kind of cut in here because we're coming on
Sure.
short here to the time. One last question I'll ask you for you guys is that this is even a problem in Japan. It's not just, we talk about, making visual novels outside of the country popular, but what about internally in the country? Because when I went over there and talking to a lot of people, they have no idea what a PC game is. And I was just using the term PC game. They call it PC games. That's how Japan calls it. They don't really call it visual novels. They say it's PC games. Because when you go to like a soft map, it says PC game. It's like the floor labels, and that refers to visual novels, like in Akihabara and stuff. But when I was talking to the friends I met over there, she's like, my brother likes Steins Gate, but I don't know what you're talking about. And they're the teenagers, of our modern age, and it's a lot of the times this obviously isn't really an audience for girls as much because it is a lot more catered to the male gender, and that's what it is. But this is even a problem in Japan, and I just want to know your thoughts on that. How do you think? First of all, do you feel like people need to make it first of all well known in the country? First, because I was surprised to hear that it's not that popular over in Japan, and I'm like, really? I feel like this would be a huge thing because people all know game systems and Vitas and things and Sony and stuff like that, but they don't know the PC games. And so what is it's what are your opinions on that? I guess is the final question here, and we'll try to keep this a little bit short.
Okay, well, to begin with, visual novels in Japan, those are made because they're extremely cheap to produce. You just have to hire a few artists, and then you have a writer, do some basic programming, and there you go, you have a visual novel. And so that's why we have a lot of them there. But I personally think that it's not maybe what a visual novel is that is known in Japan, but it's sort of the brands themselves. Steins Gate, for example, that has a ton of things like anime, manga, besides the visual novel, and there's a lot of advertising around there. So I think that it's the brands themselves that attract people to these properties, and if they know what the brands are, they'll eventually get to the visual novel to begin with.
Yeah, as for me, I am not gonna pretend here. I don't know anything about Japan or how the market in Japan works or how the industry in Japan works. I don't know anything about that mysterious voodoo magic place. So I'm just gonna pass on this question. I'm not gonna pretend that I know anything when I don't.
All right, no, that's absolutely fine. It's just it is interesting because we always talk about trying to make it popular around the world, but it is a problem in the country itself too. Not a lot of people know what these things are in the actual country, and you think first you should probably get the country knowing what it is before you start branching off to the world. But yeah,
well, not necessarily.
I suppose. Well, give me an example. Do you have any examples?
Sure. I remember the old Metroid game on the NES. Apparently, Metroid did really, really poorly in Japan. It sold very little, and it was only when it was brought over to the West that Metroid became the series that it is today. They were really surprised how popular it was, and so you don't need to focus on your own country when making any specific product at all. If it can make well in undercovers, then that product is going to succeed.
Well, see, and that's interesting. This is a totally another topic. This could go into another topic. Japan in itself is very. I have time. I mean, Japan in itself is a very strict country. First and foremost, you look at games nope, you have to have a Japanese operating system. Nope, you have to be connected to a DMV. Nope, you have to, and they're very So the fact that they're doing that makes me feel like they want to have their country being the only people that can enjoy it, but then again the country itself isn't enjoying it, and that's and I'm not talking about people knew what Metro. I'm not talking about sales. I'm not saying that the sales need to be successful, but people just don't know what a visual novel is in Japan themselves. They don't know. The teenagers that like anime and go to Akihabara don't know what a PC game. I'm serious. I talked to people on the street. They do not know what a visual novel is, and it's maybe it's because of the term I use, but then I say PC game, and they still are oh, I've heard about that, but I don't really know what the heck it is. And that to me is
because the PC is really small in Japan. They don't really play a lot of PC games.
That is one case that I did get into about that, but it's interesting, and that's something to just kind of wrap up on. Did you have something to say? Sorry, Metal.
Yeah. Well, visual novels, they make up 70% of the PC game market in Japan, so it's actually pretty surprising that they don't know what that is.
I mean, they're not,
that big.
Japan is not really a big PC gamer. They're not. The PC has definitely died in Japan. It's not a very popular like gaming platform. I mean, you look at Steam and everything is like locked on Steam and you can't install it. I saw people like trying to install like Metal Gear Revengeance and they're like, nope, you're in Japan, can't put this on. And they're like, excuse me, because they just
Seriously?
yeah, I'm serious. And
Wow.
they like have a lot of like locks on Steam and stuff. But yeah, so it's just interesting. That's just something to kind of reflect on and think about. But anyways, we are wrapping up here. We got about a minute left. Are there any
Okay.
final thoughts or closing conclusions that you guys want to say?
I think that perhaps maybe if the visual novels themselves come with like notable characters like Phoenix Wright, for example, people know who Phoenix Wright is. So I think that perhaps if we come up with like notable characters, that might influence people to go check out to see what these series are, and that will eventually lead them down the path of visual novels.
Yeah, sure. Visual novels, go make them popular, because that will be good somehow. I don't have anything to add.
No, it's fine. All right, well, thank you guys for joining me. Thanks to everyone who listened to the podcast. There was one thing we didn't get a chance to get into, which if I might open this up to a discussion in a thread, actually, because I want to at least continue this discussion. It's interesting. Is we didn't get into how anime adaptations can affect
Oh yeah, we missed that.
yeah, visual novels,
I suggested
just
that
like
one.
with Steins Gate and stuff like that. So I'm actually going to open this up in the podcast thread, so please listen, or please answer, feel free to, that place is a place for discussion, so feel free to have, that kind of discussion, and we can kind of open that question up for people, what anime adaptations do you feel like, are they good to have, because people associate with anime, but the visual novels. Anyways, thank you guys for joining. Sorry, excuse me, I'm losing my voice now. Thank you guys for joining. It was a pleasure to have you, and that's pretty much it. You guys can say bye, I guess.
Bye, guys.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks guys for coming.
Goodbye, everybody.